right, welcome to another episode of The Influential Nonprofit. I am your host, Mary Ann Dersch. I work with nonprofit leaders to grow their influence so they can raise more money without feeling rejected or pushy. And I'm with Jess Campbell. No one wants to feel rejected or pushy, do they, Jess?
No, we don't.
No, they don't. Jess is with Out In The Boons and a small shop fundraising house teaching nonprofits how to raise more money through writing killer stories. So we're going to talk about killer stories today. All right. Now, before I get into that, I always start with the same question. I don't know if you know this question. The question is, tell me something that you're really proud of that you don't get to brag about a lot.
Good question. Okay. I will tell you that when I was 26, I packed 2 bags and moved to New York City. I had a life, I had a boyfriend, but I also had a big goal. And I was already working in nonprofits. I wanted to be in New York because every major nonprofit in the world has some sort of office there.
So you didn't go to New York for like Broadway stardom dreams. You went to New York for nonprofit dreams. That is devotion to the industry.
I did. And I had saved money for months. I did it all on my own. I booked a one-way ticket and I did it. And it was hard. It was scary. It was intimidating. It was also one of the best periods of my entire life. And I learned so much about myself, about the sector, about people, about urban living. And I already tell my husband that I feel badly for my 6-year-old daughter, who I just project already that she needs to live in New York for a moment in time, because it was just so transformational for me. And I don't think that everyone would take that kind of risk or make that kind of effort to follow a dream that they'd been sitting on for quite some time. But it was just the right moment at the right time that allowed me to do that. And I'm just so proud of myself for taking that leap.
So I heard this quote and it really jumped into me. And this guy, his name's Mike Walsh. He's a speaker. But he said, fear is temporary, regret lasts forever.
Yes.
And that made me think of that, like, fear is temporary.
Yes.
And you're afraid because that's where you, and at the equanimity, like I talk a lot about equanimity, like holding space for two things to be true. Like it can be awesome and scary. I don't have to decide, is this awesome or scary? It's all the things, right? Mm-hmm. So, but being in that space of really stretching yourself, and then now and I'm sure that carried forward in so many lessons when you faced uncertainty.
Absolutely. It also allowed me to just, they say if you can do it in New York, you can do it anywhere. And I left New York with so much confidence in my professional life, in my personal life, in my relationship, because I had just done it. Yeah. And it was a result after the fact too. I think people hired me because of the organizations I was able to have worked at in New York, and they were credible and prestigious. Yeah. and all those things. So it changed my life.
Wow. Yeah, that's such a cool story. Thank you for sharing that. Where are you at right now?
I'm in Southern California.
Okay.
San Juan Capistrano, where the swallows fly.
So from New York to San Juan Capistrano.
Yes.
Okay. Do you love it? Is it like beautiful?
It is. And it's home. So my husband and I actually met when we were in 4th grade. We are Orange County natives. After New York, I moved to LA and worked for a while. But when we had our, like I mentioned, 6-year-old, grandparents are helpful. So we came back home.
Yes. Yeah. Awesome. All right. So let's get into storytelling. So what makes a killer? You said you help nonprofits raise more money through writing killer stories. So what makes a killer story?
Well, I think to back up, it's like, why stories? Okay. I think nonprofits have this urge and tendency to want to, I call them billboard announcement style messages, where you want to like a neon sign, say, see what we're doing here, or sign up for this, or volunteer for that.
Right.
And the truth is that people retain information more when it's told through a story. That's why storytelling has been around from the beginning of time. And so when I see messages on social media or emails come through and they're super heavy with images and buttons and links and all this stuff, I really want people to consider trying pulling all of that down, stripping it away, and figuring out what's one call to action that people can tell through a story. For example, this morning I sent an email out to my list about a time when I was in 7th grade when my best friend lost her mouth retainer, her like $600 mouth retainer, and she knew her mom was going to be so upset with her. And so because we were best friends, we were attached at the hip, her mom packed us both ponchos and gloves and said, you're both going dumpster diving. And so on a Friday afternoon, after a week of school, we hopped in the dumpster and we sifted through pounds and pounds and pounds of trash, half-eaten apples and ketchup and, sandwiches. And we didn't end up finding the actual retainer, which was such a bummer, but man, were we laughing. And it just, thickened our relationship. It was a moment of hilarity. And so I told that story and connected it to my call to action. And so I know that people are going to relate to that, whether it's having a best friend, whether it's doing something for someone you care about, whether it's just having a ridiculous moment that you remember 25 years later. And I think what makes a killer story is things that actually aren't extraordinary, but things that are ordinary, like being in middle school with your best friend, like having kind of this moment where it's, you trip and fall, or you are dumpster diving, and it builds that know, like, and trust factor. It gets the point across. It's entertaining. For all those reasons, I really strongly encourage nonprofit organizations to consider message telling through storytelling.
Okay, so I get the why. So, and I also feel like a lot of times nonprofits are telling stories, but they're not really telling like the kind of story that connects with people, right? What I'm getting at is this killer story is the kind that really connects with people. And I just, what makes a story, like, what grabs at you? Like, what about a story will grab me?
I think it's what I teach is called a story of transformation. I encourage people to tell stories about staff members, board members, volunteers, or participants who've been through the program who are on the other side. Someone comes through your program, they experience your services, and then there's usually a left or right moment. And for those that make the right turn, for example, and their life is improved or better because of your services, because of your staff, because of your program, now they're able to do A, B, and C with their life, or things are transformationally better. And telling that story of someone who has overcome, it's inspirational. There's a reason why movies never ever get old. There's a reason why I can watch Remember the Titans or whatever
right
20 times over and over again. It's because it gives us hope. It inspires us. Sometimes it can educate us. And I really tell people to focus on that transformation story versus the story of someone just entering the program or who's maybe in the thick of that left or right moment, but tell stories of folks who've been on the other side that can, again, provide that inspiration, education, or information.
All right. One of the things that I hear, hold on. Right. One of the things that I think people hesitate is they don't want to be exploitive. And I know program people can be very protective of the people who've gone through transformation, which I completely understand. And often there's tension, between like development and marketing folks who want to tell a story, and then program people are like, you can't use my people, so how do you help nonprofits navigate that?
Totally. I've worked with a lot of people who are maybe in the domestic violence space or in human trafficking space. I know, especially in any kind of victim advocacy space, especially, it can be very sensitive. You don't always have to tell stories of the folks in your program. You can tell your origin story. You can tell stories of, as mentioned, your staff member. Why do they choose to work at your nonprofit? Maybe you have a volunteer who's been around for 15 or 20 years. Why do they keep coming back? What's something funny that happens around the office? What's something, as I mentioned, ordinary that happens that we can all relate to? I did a post recently where I was saying, what's something that never ever gets old? And it was like, when your boss cancels a meeting, that will never get old. How can you, make a bridge to that being something else in your organization? There's stories that are endless, and it might require some creativity. It could be about your planning process. I really encourage organizations to let people peek behind the curtain, share about your recent campaign, share about some event you just launched or, produced. Get vulnerable. If you're struggling in some way, you're lacking volunteers, or maybe you didn't hit a mark financially, you don't have to hold back on that. People want to be helpful, but if you never tell them how they can be helpful or why they should be helpful, those things also become difficult to do.
I'm so glad that you said that, and you mentioned vulnerability, because that is one of the things that I teach influence, which means getting people you have no authority over to do what you want them to do. And often the most vulnerable person in the room is the most powerful person, and people gravitate and towards people who are truly themselves. That's my puppy Tina. She wants to get out of her crate and it's not time. So we're all just gonna roll with it, everyone. This is what life is like. Tina can't win. We're setting a precedent here. People want authenticity. They want vulnerability. They want the truth, right? And we've been taught kind of in marketing is you got to show. So here's how I see it is like, I have to show that I am, like, as a nonprofit, I feel less than, I feel like a little bit. So I have to make myself super shiny, right? And perfect so that you'll give to me, when actually it's the opposite. What it is that like, the more authentic you are, the more truth that you tell, and trust your donors, trust your supporters with the truth. Like, tell them. And I love what you say, peek behind the scenes. If it didn't work out, you can share that, right? And then what I'm also hearing is take something maybe simple or mundane and then tie it to something bigger, like a bigger call to action or a bigger issue. Right?
Yeah, I actually have a formula, and it's a combination of a few things to tell a great story. Think of something that's very common. You spilled coffee on your shirt, you're running late to drop off, you stubbed your foot getting out of the shower. Like, what's something that's kind of very ordinary but frustrating but relatable, right? And then how can you transition that to bridge over to something happening in your nonprofit? So for example, I ran a workshop and someone gave me the different parts and I put it together, and her parts were something like, she was a organization that focused on literacy for elementary age students, and they were struggling with getting books to be able to send home with kids for the summer. And she said her relatable thing or her annoying thing was waiting in a doctor's office with her, several children. That's hard for everyone. It can be stressful, to say the least. And so I put a quick story together, like, I was at the doctor's office waiting for our appointment. I have 2 kids, nothing to entertain them. But luckily I had my couple of books hidden in my purse, and not every child has access to free resources and free books to last them through the summer, which is why insert organization name is so important. And when you provide support, or when you donate a book, you are providing, literacy education for kids all summer long, or something like that. It's super simple, but that's how you can kind of bridge a story together. It doesn't have to be super long. It doesn't have to be super dense, but it should be relatable.
Yeah. So really that's the thing, is being relatable to other people's, like taking everyday experiences and then relating them to your mission. Okay. So I've been watching a lot of TikTok, and I follow this guy on TikTok, and I actually asked him to be on the podcast, and he runs a nonprofit in Chicago, and
Is it Jamal?
I don't know it's called Camp something.
Jamal Cannon is from The Block.
The Block. Yes, that's him. The Block.
Oh, okay. He's amazing.
He's amazing. I'm trying to figure out how to get in touch with him.
Oh, I can connect you.
Okay, perfect. Because he made a TikTok and he talked about how he went to this like dinner and he told a story, and the story is about like someone who had got, a kid who had gotten shot to death through like gun violence. And he said the people received the story like it was a wild, wild west picture. And then he felt like it, I don't want to, I want to make sure I'm doing this justice. I don't want to choose words that he didn't use, but I would say like he felt a little like exploitative at the way. And then he said he got in a car with someone after, and I was like, tell me more stories like that. And he was like, okay, wait, like that story's like super painful. This isn't like for your entertainment, And he had a really hard time connecting. And he was talking about, and these are the people who sit on boards and sit on foundations and decide who gets the money. And he's like, I'm just not going to play that game. Right. And I 100% agree with that. And a lot of, the work I do is helping people to find instead of trying to convince people to care, like find your right people, right? I call it the philanthropic heart. So we're basically connecting philanthropic hearts, and you can't change a philanthropic heart. You can only connect to it. And that's why some person care and some person doesn't. Like, okay, they probably weren't his people, but also what it felt like to like share something really personal and painful and not be received as painful, right? Like it felt like he said it felt like a Wild West like show. They were like, ooh, tell us more stories like that. Not like, oh my, you know what I mean? Like it just didn't land right for him. And I think that is it felt performative, like, oh, tell us more of the, like regale us with more of these stories. And he's like, wait, these are real lives of people that I'm dealing with. I'm so glad you know him, because I think
he's amazing. And for anyone listening, if you want a in real life example of how to build influence and tell stories across social media, you need to be following @Jamal Cannon on TikTok.
Yeah.
He has grown like over 45,000 followers in weeks. And
he tells the truth. He tells
the truth and stories. A lot of what he does is storytelling, and what he doesn't do is hit people up for money all the time.
Right.
He tells, but he also tells a lot of stories of transformation of people and the benefits out of and because of his program. He tells a lot about his origin story, why he started the Block, why the Block is an important part of his community. He tells a lot of stories of hope, which I think is inspiring. It's relatable. He does a lot of his storytelling while he's just walking down the
walking down the street.
Yes, it's nothing
right. And I think that's
nothing produced.
Yes. And so there's a couple things that are coming through for me in that one. But yes, I'll go follow him because he is authentic. He is completely embodied. He understands who he is. And people are attracted to that. He doesn't have to he doesn't have to hit you up for money because you want to give him money because you know that he's so authentic, right? This is a hard habit to unlearn, like the idea of being vulnerable and being authentic, because we were taught we have to like be polished and or pitiful. You know what I mean? Like, you have to show, like, you have to like, what we call what would I call it? Like philanthropy porn. You have to keep like showing the sick kids, like, to keep people's attention. And like, that's what we were sort of taught the way to market. And then when you see something like this, that is authentic, it's not polished, right? Like he's just walking down the street, telling a story. That's what people get excited about. And I feel like sometimes what happens is, this is just my experience, is that maybe there are people in the organization, because he's the founder and the director, right? So he's got a certain amount of sway. there are people who are like, well, we have to have it polished, or we have to have it perfect, or it has to go through 6 levels of, of approval. And by that time, it's the shell of what it was, and it really reflects nothing of what you wanted to say. So a lot of it is an organization being ready to stand in their truth, right? Because what he knows and what you know is that you're not for everybody. Right. And so, and if people are looking at him and they're like, that's not for me, that I want that. Right. Like we talk about polarity like it's a bad thing, but actually polarity can be good. If I repel you, that's fine, because that's way less people I have to weed through. Instead of like, oh, I want to pull everybody in. Like, I want everybody to care. Not everybody's going to care. And he knows that. And that's why he can say those things. And that's why he can tell that story, right? Because he's just sharing his truth. So I'm like, oh, if I share that, what will the foundations think? Blah, blah, blah. Like, and then you wind up not saying anything at all. That's just what I see. So is that something that you help people navigate, is like how to, like the politics of being more authentic and having a killer story?
Absolutely. So part of my process when I help nonprofits tell stories is just to, one, get on board with telling stories, which we've established everyone should do. And the studies and data actually show that stories of hope and inspiration are way more effective from a marketing standpoint than those stories of kind of despair. And so really leading with that is actually something that people should be focused on. And then part of it is also just getting in a cadence. Part of the reason why certain nonprofits are successful is because they have established a regular and consistent cadence with telling stories, whether that's over email or over social media, or it's recording a Loom video and sending it off to their community members, or it's getting up on a stage. And, 10,000 hour rule, the more you practice, the better you get. And if you are on shaky ground when it comes to storytelling, my advice is just to get out there and try it, because the more you do, you will be able to get feedback, listen, adjust, and then produce more stories.
Right.
I write a lot of content. I produce a lot of content for my clients as well as my own business. And what used to take me hours now takes me 20 minutes. And so, you have to kind of, it's like going to the gym, right? You have to like build those muscles, and then it becomes easier and you become faster. So I think it's establishing, yes, you need stories, picking a cadence, sticking to that cadence, and then adjusting as necessary. I also think that nonprofits need some mental work on showing up and taking up space and holding the mic. People give money to people. And I can't tell you how many donors have left organizations because I, the nonprofit fundraiser, left the organization. And your connection is with the people more so almost every single time than even the work that you do. And so if you're not showing up, if you're not sharing your stories, if people don't know, just the little things, people know about me from my business, that I'm a tea drinker, I don't drink coffee, that I have this dog I have to walk twice a day, that I have a 6-year-old little girl who's the best thing that's ever happened to me, that I love to read and I love to sit in the sun. All these little kind of quirky things people know about me because I tell stories about them all the time. And I think the last thing I'll say is you don't need 25 billion stories. Pick 6 or 7 stories. Some of the greatest influencers of our time have the same stories. They just retell in different versions every single week. And so I would say pick your kind of 4, 5, 6 stories. And then how can you just retell that in a different format, in a different way, from a different angle over and over and over again?
Right. Because you could tell it from an inspirational angle, an educational angle, an entertaining angle. Like there's a lot of ways you could take one story and tell it. And I created a system. I just call it like one good story. So I tell one good story a week, and I'm my own, you're your own, right? And we know how to drive out a lot of content because we know how to develop the systems and put people in place. And like, oh, it's so hard. It's like you develop, I love the word cadence. You develop like that tempo, that timing, what cadence. And then, and then you build the systems to support it. So like I'm talking with you right now, I have a podcast team and I have a VA, and my virtual assistant will make this into a YouTube video and 5 social media posts. And then I have a VA and I have a podcast team that will write my show notes and upload this, and all of those things together. And I'll just be super transparent. All of those things together cost me $800 a month. Right, to be on social media every single day and to be putting out YouTube content, LinkedIn content, because I really focus on LinkedIn and Facebook. I will TikTok one day. I swear, I feel the call, because I'm watching and paying attention and seeing how this could work for me, and like an authentic, because I want it to be authentic. But like, you literally can drive out content once you develop that system and that cadence, and you really commit to it. And it doesn't have to be a ton of money, right? It's just, and the other thing I want to highlight what you said is really about like standing in the spotlight, like opening up, like standing in with the mic, like being seen and feeling worthy of that, and that's kind of what I work with people on, because one of the things I learned is if you're not communicating effectively internally, you can't communicate effectively externally. And sometimes telling the truth, being vulnerable, can be scary. And people, like, that'll trigger some people, and they will knowingly or unknowingly undermine efforts to do that.
Yeah, but it goes back to what you were saying at the start of our conversation, that you can be scared or fearful and inspiring.
Yeah.
You can be nervous to take up space, and you can, make someone's day. And that takes practice too. As someone that's been doing work on myself and healing my inner child around taking up space, something I'm very uncomfortable with. It's not easy work to go look deep in that, but I've been getting hits and signs and messages and all the things about taking up more space and being unapologetic about it. And it just goes back to what I said. The reason why people give to leaders like Jamil Cannon for the block is because of him, and they trust him as a leader to guide his organization. And if he wasn't brave enough to show up on platforms on TikTok and tell these stories, no one would know about him or the block at all.
Right.
And so you got to do it.
And almost like your fear can be part of the story. Like this, I'm terrified to tell you this.
Yeah.
I have found the emails that I was like, oh God, here it goes. And I hit send, have been the most, the ones I get the most feedback on.
I agree. Or the ones where you take a real stand. There's a lot going on in our world right now. Some things that I have a real red line around.
Yeah.
And I don't really want people in my community who don't share my values. And if that means that, for example, I just shared something after the recent Supreme Court ruling around women's health care, and I am firm and steadfast in my decision, all of the replies were nothing but positive.
Yeah.
But I also had the most unsubscribes from my email list ever. And that's okay.
That's okay. That's okay. And Julia Campbell, I know she's a nonprofit, and she did a really big thing. And I was like, nice work. I mean, I saw it and I know exactly what, you take a stand, and, I definitely support that. I did a thing because my kids are Black. I have 3 adopted kids, and I did a very personal email about what my son's experiences were, after George Floyd and all of that. And it was like, here, this is my family. This is my truth. This is what I deal with every day as white parents with 3 Black kids, and how we navigate the world. And that's what you say, like, people know me. They know that about me. They know, of course, I have dogs, but they know I have dogs, and they know I have kids, and my kids are adopted out of foster care. And they know me. And they know I love big Diet Cokes and high heels and all of that, like, because I want them to know me. And then when people meet me, they feel like they know me, which is what I want. And so when people, meet your clients, or, they want to feel like they know you. And I feel like that's a different thing. Like, I do feel like executive directors, CEOs, they say, well, no, I want to highlight the clients, and like I do feel like, am I taking something away from the people I serve by centering myself? And what I'm hearing is like, no, because people are really giving to the, the development director or the CEO or whoever is the face of that organization.
I think too, there's a way to center yourself through the stories of your program. What's your personal experience? I think that in fundraising, copywriting, marketing, you is a really powerful word. But I think that in fundraising, I is also a powerful word, because it doesn't sound the same when you say, oh, when I talked to my program officer about their experience with client, Sasha, and this was their experience. It sounds way different when you say, when I sat down with Sasha and she told me this. And so I think as a fundraiser, if that's your role in an organization or a nonprofit leader, you need some of those I statements to show that you are actually truly connected to the work.
Yeah. And because sometimes I just have a default that I use, which is if I'm talking about something that is like, I'm introducing an issue, or like, hey, do you ever feel like you can't get people's attention, or you're hesitant to ask for what you want? But when I will use you, but when I talk about like problems, or like what I like to use we, because I want people to know that I'm in it with them. Like I'm not calling them out. You know what I mean? Like I'm saying, like, you did this, like, no, we do this and this, like when I told you before, like we were taught, like not you were taught to market this way, you're wrong, like we were taught, we're all in this together, you know what I'm saying? So I'm very careful how I use I, you, and we. And I feel like that's important, like, because we're taught, oh, you use you all the time. And yes, that is important, and people's endorphins light up when they see you. And also, right, you want to, like, I call it embodiment, like I eat my own cooking, right? Like I'm going to put myself out there, like you know what I mean? I have to be the model for what I see. If I want you to be more vulnerable and authentic, I go first, right? I don't get to sit back and be like, oh no, I'm good, you guys go ahead, you stretch, totally. I'm just going to sit here. So like you're saying, you're doing the work, you're doing the shadow work, like you're doing all of that to help you like ascend to that next level. And there's one more thing I want to bring up, because I think this is really important. And this is definitely like this concept of the philanthropic heart. I'm really like, it had a big download. I recorded a podcast episode about it. But when I talk about the philanthropic heart, I talk about like we all are hardwired by our childhood experiences, that why things land on us and they don't, why I care about, it's not that I don't care about our unhoused brothers and sisters. That's just not where I give, right? Like I'm a rescuer. I have the whole story about why that is. But you bring up a really great point, because when I think when we were taught, hey, this is how you fundraise, it's about these lower order needs of like, hey, of relieving pain. So a person is hurting, you give us money, they'll stop hurting. That's important. I'm not saying that's not important. But what I'm hearing you say is there's these, what I call these higher order needs of, of my higher order needs, meaning like the legacy I want to leave, the difference I want to make in the world. The impact I want to have, like those are like the contribution I want to make to the planet in general, like those are higher order needs, right? And so what I'm hearing is those stories connect to those higher order needs, which that's what makes it powerful, because yes, I can relieve a pain and that's important, but also I get to like align my assets with the highest and best version of myself. You know what I'm saying? Which is incredibly powerful relationship. Because the low, what 100%. Here's what I call it, like the lower order is like, that's just transactional. That when you have those higher order needs, it's transformational. Right 100%. Now they're changing. They're just not giving a check. They're changing because of their relationship with your organization. Talk about powerful. They're different people for having been in your world. So everyone's up leveling. This is my dream, Jess.
Totally.
Everyone up leveling.
Everyone's invested. I think another example of someone or an organization that does this really, really well is Humans of New York. And when they tell their multi-part series stories. He drops one an hour every hour for like 12 or 14 hours. And people are on the edge of their seats. They have notifications clicked on and they're coming back for more. A lot of the times he runs a fundraiser attached to them where he'll raise, $2 million in 48 hours for whoever story he's telling. And what I think is brilliant that he does that not a lot of organizations do, but could do a much better job, is what I call the Loopback story. So is there a story in your organization where you told it, maybe at your last end of year giving campaign? What's the update on that person? Where are they now? What's their life look like 6, 7, 8 months later? They already invested in your organization, this person's story, both on a financial level, but also on an emotional level. They've read the story, they're connected. So why don't you loop back and bring them in even deeper? And while doing that, share and talk about the impact, the lasting impact, to your point about legacy, that they've had all these many months later.
Yeah.
I think storytelling is just such a powerful tool that can be used so many ways.
The other thing I just want to say is I feel like the donor story is one we just don't tell enough. And one of my favorite episodes of my podcast is when I interviewed a colleague, friend of mine, Corey Kupfer, about when he got asked for an extraordinarily large amount of money and how that changed his life. And, and he's a big guy and he's like from New York and he has this law firm and he's a big talker and but he got so emotional and his life was transformed because of his gift. Right. And so I feel like sometimes we're like, we want the gift and we want, but when you are part of someone's transformation, when you are when that donor can tell the story of how their life is so much better because they gave a very significant gift, for them, that is, and I just feel like that that story there's a lot of opportunity to tell that story more, and just talk to people about, why did you give? What does it do for you? And because people, first of all, they love to share it. And it just, the emotion and oh my God, just the connection. And when if you're afraid to ask somebody for an extraordinary amount of money, go back and find this episode. Because you'll never hesitate again when you see how transformational it was to his life. And philanthropy is a gift, right? And giving from the heart and all of that. And I think that's a story that I think there's so much opportunity for donors to tell their stories, because donors want to see ourselves reflected. We want to feel a part of the community. Amy Fazio told me this. I don't know if you know her, but she was on my summit last year and she said, people come for the cause, but they stay for the community. They stay to be a part of something greater than themselves. And that's what the storytelling can remind them, hey, you're a part of this community, you're part of something greater than yourself.
Absolutely. And I think there's a difference between saying, hey, meet this donor and hear why they gave a whole bunch of money versus, it happening in maybe a more organic or authentic setting. That's where I think peer fundraising can come in such a powerful way, where you have these champions out there on your behalf, sharing with their network of friends, family, colleagues about why it is you support an organization, or sharing on LinkedIn. I think actually LinkedIn is a really great tool for board members and volunteers and donors to share why they're connected to certain organizations. And sometimes that might take a little effort on the organization's part, asking a donor to tell their story, to prompt that idea in their head.
Or listening and creating the story yourself, right? Because sometimes oh, they're not going to sit and think it through. Or just at one of the things that we talked about too is at board meetings or whatever, just ask people to make a little video on their phone. It's cool, it can be rough, it can be or
just have everyone go around in a circle and share their story. That will build so much connection with your board. And then you can mentally kind of log that. And then you will have the content to, with their permission, of course, retell that story in email, social media, whatever form.
Awesome. Okay, we could do this for a while, I guess. So is there anything, but I do want to wrap up, and is there anything else you want people to know that we haven't talked about as far as storytelling?
I would say that just get out there and start telling some stories. I want to read stories. You want to read stories. Everyone wants to consume good stories, and try to share the details. What color was it? What did it sound like? What did it smell like? What did it feel like? Adding in those details really makes someone feel like they're there with you. And they don't have to be long. They don't have to be complicated. But just, I really encourage anyone who's maybe not been a super storyteller to just give it a try.
Yeah, permission to not be great at it. Like, it's okay if you're not good at it at the beginning. You know,
100%.
you'll get better. Okay, now you'll have your social media, your Instagram and LinkedIn in this show notes. And it's Jess at outintheboons.me if people want to reach you, and we'll have that in the show notes as well. Okay, my last question is, I love karaoke, and so if I would ever be in Southern California or you're in St. Louis and we wind up at a karaoke bar together, the divier the better. I like places where everything's a little bit broken.
Yeah.
I feel super at home. What's your go-to song?
Oh my goodness, you were taking me back when I worked for an organization called Lift LA in the Pico Union area. We would go over to, K-Town in LA, and that's what like the team building would be. And oh my gosh, I cringe because that is just so not my scene. I am so not a karaoke singer. That being said, we have a great dive bar here where I live. It's called the Swallows Inn. It's been here forever. I'm sure they do karaoke. I think honestly, my head is drawing a blank, but my daughter goes to the Y, and so she comes home every day in the car singing the YMCA song. So I don't know if that doesn't really fit my personality, but that's what's coming to mind. Otherwise, you can never go wrong with like a good Bon Jovi or something,
right? That's always the thing. If you're like don't want all the spotlight, just pick a song everybody knows and they all scream it back at you, and it's more like you're sitting around the piano singing. That's
totally.
Don't do that for me though, because I want totally. I was this karaoke night once, and I was singing, and this guy like just gets on the stage, like grabs the mic, and I was like, whoa, no, my time. And then I was like looking at the DJ, and he just turned his mic off.
Oh, how funny.
He's like, the mic's not on, don't worry about it. I was like, what are you doing? Like, this place had this little stage, and I just loved it so much because, like, I don't know, I just get my rock star on. It's my full self-expression there.
Amazing.
All right, this has been awesome. Jess, thank you so much for sharing with everyone here. Jess is the founder of Out in the Boons, and thanks for teaching us how to create killer stories.
Thanks, Marianne. I appreciate you being together with me.
All right. And that's it for this episode of The Influential Nonprofit. If you haven't yet, you can go to theinfluentialnonprofit.com, and a lot of the stuff that I talk about on the podcast are these different concepts around communication and leadership and managing your emotions and all that. I have a little download kit. If you haven't gotten it already, you should go get it because it's really good. And that's it for me. We'll see you next time on The Influential Nonprofit.